talk about wet sanding a guitar to get it prepared for buffing and polishing after you've spray painted it. To this point, you've very carefully done a lot of work to get the guitar sanded, get it sealed. You've already watched a video about how to prime it and paint it with primer. And painting it with a color is the same process, and you've done that. And then after the color is dried, it's got several coats of clear paint, clear finish put on top, and that's had an opportunity to dry. Lacquer, clear lacquer, is going to need about 2 weeks to fully harden and fully cure when you spray it on and let it dry. If you don't wait long enough, you will have trouble with this when you go to wet sand it and buff it. Primarily with the buffing because of the heat. If it hasn't dried long enough, it'll get very soft and squishy and it'll smear around the guitar. It's not good. Wet sanding is essential for all the steps here with getting this finish. It's really important. Whenever you spray a finish out of a can and it goes onto the surface, there's what's called orange peel. And that's where the droplets come out of the can and they kind of smash into the surface and they disturb and disrupt the liquid that's already on the guitar. This started to harden. And so the entire surface will be nice and shiny and it will look very good, but it's not going to look as good as maybe something that you've seen at a store because those have been wet sanded and buffed and yours hasn't. So we need to get it there. What we're going to do is I'm going to use some 1000 and 1500 grit sandpaper, and it's soaked overnight in a cup of water with a little drop of hand soap or dish detergent in it. And it is so important, it has to soak overnight to soften the paper backing and to soften the abrasive. If you don't, if you take dry sandpaper off the shelf, dunk it in a cup of soapy water a few times and start to sand, it will leave horrible scratches in the finish. And you'll wonder why it's not coming out well. It's because you didn't soak it overnight. This has to soak overnight, at least 24 hours. Anything that you don't use today, you can put it back in and let it soak, and this can soak for several days. After a few days, the water is going to look a little Change it, put some fresh water in, a little bit of soap, and proceed, keep going. The sandpaper that we use in the sandpaper kits you get is very durable sandpaper, and so a little goes a long way. So I've got some sandpaper here. I'm checking it to make sure that there aren't any dust particles or any loose grit that would get between the paper and the surface that would drag across and leave some scratches. I think we're okay. We're going to use a trowel. This is wet. I'm going to intentionally put a little bit of soapy water on the surface of the guitar, and I'm going to begin to sand lightly in small circles. The worst thing that can happen is what's called cut through. Cut through is where you sand through the clear finish and into the color coat. If at any point in time you see, in this case red, pink or red in the sandpaper or in the water, or if I wipe this off and there's pink or red in the rag, I have cut through someplace and I need to stop. Let everything dry, make sure it's good and dry, and recoat it with more clear finish and wait for it to fully harden before you attempt to wet sand and buff. I don't know if you can see with the light and the camera angle how this is all shiny, hasn't been touched with orange peel, and this is all getting very hazy right in here. And in this portion here, we've got some hazy places and also some speckly looking, silvery looking dots. And what that means is I'm sanding off the high places and it's getting dulled. We'll bring that back, don't worry about it, that'll come back. And the shiny little flecks are the low places that haven't been touched by the sandpaper yet. That's telling me that I have more wet sanding to do. I'm not finished. So, a little more water, a little more soapy sandpaper, tiny tight little circles, and work on a small area at a time and get it completely sanded before you move on to the next area. I'll do a spot about the size of a grapefruit or so maybe. As it sands, you'll feel it change the resistance under your fingertips as more and more surface area is coming in contact with the sandpaper. You can see here this section in the middle has really come a long way. I've only got just a few little flecks, and I did a bigger circle this time, so I've got more flecks out here, and I hope that shows on the camera. I'll turn this around a little bit. This is time consuming. A guitar body like this may take you somewhere. If you've never done this before, you can plan to probably spend 3 or 4 hours on this. Maybe a little more, maybe a little less. You get good at it, it goes faster. But the most important thing is to stop frequently and check your progress. Wipe it away and inspect. As soon as you can see that you don't have any more of those little shiny flecks, those little silvery flecks, that means you've sanded the low places and you can proceed onto another area of the guitar. This guitar is just a demo for today, but we'll do a little bit more. Working next area, I'm going to overlap a little bit because I know this portion didn't get fully sanded. Work in tight little circles. And sand. You want to watch the water getting into like these ferrule holes in the back, because water can get into the holes in the different parts of the guitar and get in and cause the grain to swell and make raised places. Then you go to sand it and you cut through all the layers of clear coat and the paint and you've got raw wood. So try to keep those hole areas from getting too much water on them. And I cut up a lot of sandpaper, but the reality is I could probably do this entire guitar body with this piece of sandpaper and maybe a second piece. And clean off the surface here and have another look at it. And while it's wet, it's hard to tell. It has to evaporate, but it's making progress. There's some good stuff happening here. It's little flecks in here, some in here. I can probably go back and do this some more. This is only going to turn out as well as your original sanding and then your original paint application. So it needs to be quality all the way through, or you're going to find you have trouble at the end. Another area that we need to talk about is the radius part of the guitar body. You've probably run a router bit around the edge of the guitar to round it off. Maybe use a small radius, maybe you'll use a large radius. And this is a source of a lot of frustration for folks their first couple guitars. When you go to wet sand along here, very little pressure, okay? The pressure you're using on this big surface area is spread around the big surface area. If you go at this small area, one of these spots with the same kind of pressure, you're going to go through all the layers of paint and all the layers of clear. So you want to proceed very lightly and very cautiously. It's very common to take the sandpaper across the corner and go through multiple layers of clear and paint and have raw wood or have the primer show or something like that. So be real careful about that as you proceed. Same thing with the sides, as you're sanding with the sides. You're going along with that. We'll do a little Okay, so a few minutes have elapsed and we've wet sanded not all, but a lot of it with 1000 grit. We're going to go back and this will have left its own scratch and swirl pattern from the 1000 grit sandpaper. This is 1500 grit sandpaper. We're going to repeat the process for the entire guitar. A little bit of soapy water on the surface, and you're going to work the area in small circles. Watch the water getting into the holes so it doesn't cause the grain to swell. We're going to work this. And the idea is that this finer sandpaper will remove a lot of the scratches and the haze and the swirl marks from the coarser sandpaper that we just used. And as you sand, this soapy water and the sanded finish and everything makes kind of a slurry or a paste. So you get a little more water. And this is a much finer sandpaper. So I'm feeling pretty comfortable at the moment with not checking quite as frequently for a cut through on this flat area. Now on the edges I would still be very cautious. And I noticed a significant difference in the appearance of that surface where I wet sanded with 1500 here versus back here with 1000 with the fineness of the swirls that are left in the surface. You do the entire guitar body with 1000 and with 1500, all the surfaces that will show, and then the next step would be to go ahead and buff it.